um, so remember, we are focusing on the impact claim, right? Now, from what we've been discussing in previous sessions, there are many other things to this. We want to know more about design. Kaise hua? Kiska idea tha? Is this reasonable? Ye wo, is it too taxing on these kids? You're taking more of their time after a whole day. I mean, there are many issues of design, but we are keeping that aside. We are also not asking about implementation. Kisne kiya? Unka regular math teacher ne kiya? Kisi aur se karwaya? Kaise hua? Was it more joyful learning compared to lots of things we can ask about design and implementation, right? So remember, the evaluation question is a different kind of question. Just asking at the end of the day, design ko hatao, implementation ko hatao, kar diya. Right now we are looking back, so and asking ki how much change, right, did this program create, at least in the primary objective, right? Primary objective was in बच्चों का maths skill या capacity बढ़ाना है, right? So there could be other things also. Who knows? Maybe इनको discipline ज़्यादा discipline की ज़रूरत है, ये वो, right? But whatever is the thinking of the school, right? So the claim is that the impact on maths learning is proxied by the difference in the average math scores over the year. Correct? Now, ho sakta hai ki some kid who was earlier scoring 10 in class 5 is now scoring 90. That kid, is a much bigger leap. Some kid was scoring 40 earlier, is still scoring 40 after a year, right? It could be. Remember, we are talking averages. Because when you're talking about a program, it might, almost always a program impacts different people differently, right? If we all have fever and we all take paracetamol, it will have different effects on all of us, right? Because depending upon many parts of body constitution, this, that, and the other, right? So, right. So the claim is a claim about the program as a whole. Therefore, we are taking the average, right? And we are saying, pehle average 30 tha, ab average 70 hai. Ye gap jo hai must be because of the program. That's the claim. Okay. So now let's hear from some of you. I think most of you found it a bit problematic, right? I think right? Nobody's, I think, when I sat in briefly on the groups, I don't think anybody was like, yeah, nothing to discuss, perfect, right? This is reasonable, right? I think you all had, so let's try to list out what are the problems. Why do we think this is a problematic impact claim, right? Claim about impact. So I want us to focus on the claim about impact, not other aspects of this. Yes. Please, who would like to start? And I think all the groups had interesting things to say about this. So, anybody?
We could go ahead. I'll share
please.
My screen's visible? Yeah. So first of all, we thought that, there was a discussion that for a particular reason, we may not, all children may not be changed because of that reason. So we thought obviously a lot of reasons worked in combination. So different reasons for different children. So first was that maybe at home, they're getting additional support from older siblings or somebody at the community or coaching classes, which is like straightforward. Then we thought that one thing could have been that there must have been an improvement in the quality of the regular classroom, like not the remedial one, but the day-to-day classroom may have improved. There could have been a pedagogical improvement in that, which facilitated learning for them. Then improvement in other competencies of the students that have helped them comprehend math better. So we were thinking that, in the 5th standard is when suddenly problem sums come up. So for them to comprehend that and, decipher that. So maybe sort of language improvement or logical thinking improvement could have helped improve math. Then maybe a change of teacher, because we were just discussing how, sometimes it's the teacher who, we are really fond of, and in their classes, we want to improve and perform well. So that could be one thing. Another was drill and practice. So that's sort of a negative one where, in a lot of schools, Ritidi was giving an example of some school in Bengal where एग्जाम के पहले बच्चों को वो सेम क्वेश्चन
NAS result. It's a NAS result.
हाँ, तो उनको ये सेम वही क्वेश्चंस देके they keep them they keep drilling them and making them practice the same one so that improvement in scores is visible. We also thought that there could have been a change in grading pattern, जैसे कि step marking जो हम लोग बोलते थे. A lot of us have also survived school because of that, so I think that could have been one of the reasons. In general, there could be increased motivation in children. That happened in my case, and I was sharing with the group that suddenly I felt that, okay, now I need to pull up my socks. And one thing was that eventual increase of a child in math, so maybe from towards math. So maybe in general we didn't like math, but when we explored, let's say, trigonometry or somebody like differentiation, so when they start practicing those sums more, they feel more confident about math, and maybe that just increases their motivation. And yeah, so these are the couple of points that we could think of.
Thanks, Vaishali, and the group. I think before we move on to others, right, and because you've conveniently put it up for us to kind of really think about, let's keep that on. Let's just think of each of these. I think this is really good food for thought. Now, I think one general comment you made was it might impact different people differently, like my paracetamol example, right? Yeah. So that's always a tricky thing, right? When you say what's the impact of a program on each person, it might impact differently. So do we leave it at that? Oh, let's name each kid and say, oh, this kid, aisa tha, right? We'll have 25 report cards and that's it. But typically what we want is we want to get a kind of macro, a summary kind of thing, right? So that is why the average, but the problem is the average might miss out some things, right? For example, we might want to focus on the kids who did particularly poorly in the class 5 board exam, right? Even the average was 30, but maybe there were a few who scored 0, right? Who just couldn't, maybe we want to focus even within this group, right? And so on, right? So maybe the average is not enough, but the average is a start. Right, so that is not about the claim per se, but saying, oh, you can make other claims also. Don't just look at average. Look at the kids who performed least, in terms of scores in class 5, and let's see just their performance rather than all 25. Right, you could do variations of this. Right, so there's a technical term for that in this impact evaluation literature. It's called the heterogeneity effect. Right, that the fact that the same intervention might affect different people differently, but the claim is at the average level for now. Okay, so let's keep that aside. Now, I'm just looking at the order in which Vaishali mentioned them, and I think as it's written here, first was, it could be that some of these kids are going to coaching. Right now, I don't know when they'll have time for that after school and then coaching or weekends, right? Or the sibling effect. Oh, because these kids have been identified as, oh, they need some extra maths. So maybe the parents are like, we should also do something. So their parents or siblings at home, right? So are doing this. So this is a very interesting possibility, right? So if in fact these kids are also going to coaching classes or getting some help at home, and that is actually improving their maths, which is showing up in their class 6 result, then we will be misattributing the change to the program. It's not because of the program. You should give the coaching class the credit, but why are you giving the remedial maths program the credit? Correct? So this then becomes a serious problem, if in fact that's the case, right? By the way, if would you say that, let's say the coaching center thing is happening, right? Or the home, tutoring is happening. Would that lead to an overestimation of the impact of your program or an underestimation? You're saying 40 percentage point pura program ka tha, right? But if in fact some of it is because of coaching center, but you are still claiming all 40 changes because of your program, then you are ending up overestimating the true impact of the program, correct? So it could be that the program still had a 20 percentage point effect, but the other 20 was because of your home tutoring and your coaching center, right? So it's not, it doesn't completely invalidate it, but it biases it to overestimation. if in fact the coaching or home tutoring. So that's a good one. Second was that in fact the regular class 6 maths is also happening, and that is actually driving these kids to do better, right? And not your program. So then again, you're misattributing, which is, this is number, oh no, did you, it maybe not a separate number, but as you talked it, I picked it up as a point, right? So it may be because your class 6 maths is going on well. So then you're misattributing to your remedial maths program the actual impact which is happening with your regular class 6. Again, what is the direction of the bias or the misattribution? You're ending up overestimating, right, the program effect. Right? Of course, you could say it's all in the school. So this, if you attribute it to the school, it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, regular or but we are focusing on what is the impact of your extra maths. Because suppose the school says after a year, we want to know whether we should continue this because it's budgetary impact hai, and bachon ko, it's taking up so much of their time, right? So we want to evaluate, is it worth it? So then we want to look at the remedial maths per se, right? So here, then it's an overestimation because actually it's, what's really driving these kids is the regular, right? So that's a good one. So both of these, coaching centers, home tutoring, and regular this thing are all leading to misattribution through overestimation. Correct? Everybody agrees on this? It's overestimation. That's a problem. Then you have one called other competencies such as language, which is, I think, what is it? Your number 3. Very interesting point, right? So here what you're saying is something else is happening with these kids. They're learning other things. And that's why, see, the details matter, right? We are not talking about college kids where, let's say that, and we're talking about class 5 where these other right? There is other things happening in their lives, which might actually go into their improving maths, especially language, right? They are able to actually read the text or the questions a little better. And it might be, that might suddenly clear the path for some kids, right? So again, if this is what is happening, right, improvement in other competencies, then you're again misattributing to your remedial maths program, correct? Are you ending up over or underestimating? Again, you're overestimating the impact of your maths program, right? Because, but if in fact it's going the other way, right?
This is also something which is being documented in linguistic literature, that as the language performance of a child increases, the math performance also increases. Right. So in fact, both of them go hand in hand. So yeah, right. That's a very good
So that could be, right? So again, that can lead to lots of reasons why something really real is happening to these kids' skills, but you're misattributing. See, that's the thing about impact evaluation, right? We want to know how much of change is because of the program. This is the big cause, right? So there's a lot of cause language there, right? You're attributing it to the program. So then we are talking about a series of misattributions so far. Next, your number 4 is change of teacher. So, right now, so you're saying that, okay, so regular class 6 teacher and class 5 teacher setup was not very conducive. Just a different person, you know, kids are warming up to the remedial maths person, right?
So between the 5th and 6th standard change also and the remedial both.
Yeah, if it's between the 5th and 6th, then you're attributing it to the 6th, right? That between 5th and 6th is your kind of previous point, correct? Because that goes into 6th mein kuch ho raha hai because of the teacher or whatever, right? Yeah. So that's sort of similar. But the new thing with point number 4 is different teacher. Now, if it's a different teacher in the remedial maths and that's contributing, then wouldn't you attribute it to the program?
May not be the remedial teacher. The regular 6th standard maths teacher would have better competencies than the 5th standard teacher.
Yeah. So if so, what I'm saying is, if that is the case, the regular 6th standard, then that goes into the previous point, right? Previous point was that regular classroom teaching is actually driving the result. Now you can unpack what is regular classroom teaching, right? Oh, it's partly because of the teacher. It's partly because they've changed the textbook in class 6, whatever, right? So what I'm saying, Seema, is that point goes, if to the extent that it's a change of teacher in class 6 regular, That goes with our previous point. So the only new thing in point number 4 is if you're saying the change of teacher for your remedial, right? My point is, to that extent, it's not a misattribution, is it? Yeah, a change of teacher. So your remedial maths made a difference. What you're saying is it made a difference because of the change of teacher, right?
No. Oh,
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, this is not clear. Suraj, please just go over it once again.
Okay, so far we've been discussing various reasons why misattribution is happening, where in fact the real driver is somewhere else. Real driver is coaching class, real driver is home tutoring, real driver is class 6 regular class.
Yeah.
Within the class 6 regular class could be the teacher in class 6, it could be something else in class 6. So all of that
will again be misattribution, right?
Misattribution, but we've already discussed that. So
yeah,
right, in point number 2, I think, right? Yeah. So point number 4, when we say change of teacher, the only new thing, right, is if it's a change of teacher in the remedial, because change of teacher in class 6 we have already covered in our thing so far. So what I'm saying is, if you separately look at change of teacher for remedial as a cause for the result, then it's not misattribution, it's a correct attribution, correct? Because change of teacher, if it's of the remedial, then you're saying all 40% is that. You're just adding to saying it's the reason the remedial worked is because of the teacher.
Right.
You could say, no, the reason remedial worked was because they gave samosas and then they did it, right? Whatever it is, it's the program. It's something to do with the program, right? So therefore, 4 by itself, if it's remedial, is not separate. This is my only point. I think you're putting both in 4, right? The other part I've put it back to 2.
Yes.
Yeah. Then you have drill and practice. Very interesting, right? So ragadna with maths, right? Yeah, you just do more and more and you just get better at it, right? It's a little like your point 8, but it's a little different also, right? Point 5 and 8 are a little similar, but I think it's worth putting them separately, as you've, I think, done. So 5 is really drill. So more and more tests. So they're getting better at tests, and there's focus, right? So the drill. Now, if in fact it's drill and practice in the remedial maths classes, then is there any misattribution happening? Or would you say it's not misattribution, but you're again clarifying what about the remedial maths is making a difference? Is it the teacher? Is it the drill exercise, right? So what I would suggest is number 5, drill and practice. If in fact that's what's driving, drill and practice in the remedial maths is what's driving the improved score, I would still say that's the impact of your program.
No, so what we thought of is that when we were talking about drill and practice is that in the 6th standard, maybe in the regular classroom, this is how they're being taught. That before exam drill and practice, like, giving them questions similar to how it's going to appear in the exam, and that sort of like.
Oh, in the regular class. Yeah, of course. If it's in the regular class, yeah.
Sort of a thing. Like
okay, got it. So again, so I was reading your point 4 and 5 as remedial class related, but to the extent that 4 and 5 are both about regular class, it will go back to your point number 2, correct? Something about regular class. It could be class change in regular class maths teacher. It could be a change in regular class style, more drill. So then it's all because of that. It's misattribution. I was thinking drill of the remedial class itself. That of course then is not misattribution. Yeah, fair enough. So now, yeah. So I think 4 and 5, I would say as are sub parts of 2. Correct. Just clarifying ways in which your regular thing is working. Right. Almost mechanisms of your regular class, mechanism through different teacher, mechanism through style of drill, mechanism through something, right? But it's still about, but the attribution is still about regular class,
yes.
Whatever the mechanism within that. So, okay. Then number 7 is 6 is quite different. Change in grading pattern. This is a very interesting one. Right? I don't know if others also thought about this. So let's think through this logic. So suppose in fact, the class 6 exam is very easy, right? let's go overboard and say it's actually easier than class 5 exam for whatever reason, right? So that's why the kids have done well. In which case you're misattributing to the remedial maths program just some change in your instrument, correct? Your instrument of picking up maths performance. Instrument in this case is final exam, right? And so how you did it, some business with the instrument is what's, and you're misattributing to the program what's actually some business with instrument. Yes. So if in fact the class 6 exam was quite easy, then we are ending up over or underestimating program impact.
Over.
Again,
Or
overestimating.
it could be more aligned to what is being taught in the remedial classes.
It could be that, yeah. Now let's take the other extreme. Suppose class 6 exam was very difficult, more difficult than ought to be for the whatever is considered that level. And still these kids got 70%, right? Imagine that. In which case you would be overestimating or underestimating then you would be underestimating the program effect, correct? Because you gave a super tough exam and these kids scored 70. So if you had given a regular kind of exam for that, they would have scored 90. So then in fact, they're going from 30 to 90. It's even bigger effect and you're underestimating, correct? So the direction of bias depends upon the specific story, correct? Your point number 6 about change in grading pattern could lead to overestimate, could lead to underestimate, right? So this is a very tricky issue. Do you give do you give the same exam as in class 5? That doesn't make sense. That's why I very specifically said you're giving the final exam of class 6. Now, final exam in class 6 is going to be presumably, normally speaking, a bit more difficult than final exam of class 5. So, now lots of things are getting mixed up here, correct?
So while we were discussing, we thought of, let's say the teachers also need to show that, they have worked. Maybe for them to show that they've really improved. So while in the 5th standard, they were just, crossing the entire thing and giving a 0. Now they're probably being more lenient and giving step numbers. So that's what we thought step marking.
Right.
That is the grading pattern has changed.
You call it step marks. So in Kerala, they call it grace marks.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We have some way to pad it because ultimately your numbers can't look too bad because at the system level, at the school level, at the teacher level, lots of padding step. So interesting. In all these places, we use English terms. Even in Kerala, in Malayalam, we use the English term grace marks. So even Bengali, you use the English word step. Yeah. So some kind of padding, right? Because of other kind of, let's say, politics or anxieties, psychologies, right? Any which way, that could lead to misattribution to your program, right? And the misattribution, if what Vaishali is saying, this kind of padding means you're slightly making it simpler, right? You're being lenient either with the exam or with the grading, right? You're just sort of somehow pushing people up, in which case you're leading to overestimating program impact, right? But I was also suggesting you could underestimate if you go the other reason, though that doesn't, politically that doesn't make sense, maybe, but right, yeah. So that's a good one, especially, right? It's a different kind of point, number 6. Then number 7 is increased motivation in children, right? Now that motivation is somehow connected with your remedial maths,
Class, yeah.
correct? So is it a misattribution or is it correct attribution?
Could be
Correct.
It's correct attribution. You're just giving a mechanism again, right? Because we all like to think about mechanisms, right? Rather than in the abstract. So I think most of your points are about mechanism, right? Change of teacher, drill, right? These are mechanisms. But number 7 is interesting. So it's not a misattribution, right? If number 7 is what's actually happening, then that explains, and we'd say there's a solid 40 percentage point improvement because of my program. And somebody says, oh, how come? Oh, because my program increased motivation, but it's still because of the program.
It could be a placebo effect as well.
It could be placebo, but it's still program.
It's still a program.
Yeah.
It is a positive.
Right. The Eklavya effect, right, in the Mahabharata, right? Now, Drona could very well say, Drona, who seems to have rejected Eklavya, right? And then Eklavya built the statue in the forest and used that statue to inspire and get taught and became so good. Drona could then come and say, which he did, Ab Guru Dakshina De Do. Right? Because Drona could say, your archery is because of my, right? Now, there we could argue a bit about what exactly is it, but yeah, right? So here, the program, so number 7 is then, if number 7 is what's happening, then we are mostly saying this claim is okay. It's not, right? It's not a misattribution, right? All of these things could happen. I'm just right, but yeah. So 7 we are kind of okay with in terms of impact evaluation, right? In terms of our claim, and then 8, eventual increase. So like I said, I thought it's a little like number 5, but not quite. It's not the drill aspect, but you keep at it. Keep, like as they say, right? You keep at it, and dhire dhire improvement to ho hi jayega, right? It's that kind of, I think, point here. Would you say that that's a misattribution, or yeah, that's your program gave you the ability to eventually keep at it, because every day now, right, you give an extra 1 hour after school, karte raho. So I'm thinking number 8 is also not misattribution. It's again a mechanism, right, of how the program worked, or did you think it's 8? Were you thinking of 8 as a misattribution? No, 8. If 8 is happening, then the claim of 40 percentage point attributable to the program is not valid anymore. Right? Were you thinking of it like that? Because on the face of it, if I understand the point, yeah, that's how the program works.
It's an attribution, no? It should be attributed to the remedial classes in some
So
way.
when we were discussing it, we were talking on the lines of, like Riti was saying that, in general, she was not good at math, or she didn't like math. But when it came to algebra, or for Samarpita, when it came to trigonometry, is when, she started practicing more, because she would get it. And that just increased her interest in math in general. So that's what, so that way, okay, then maybe
So
trigonometry
it's
and
not due to
algebra happened
external
because
factors.
of the remedial classes, if we can say that. But if not, then I don't know.
So the question is, yeah. So on the one hand, you could say it's because all that happened because you had your class, remedial maths class. And that class,
Not necessarily it is for remedial class, because
Huh.
in class 6 these things are gradually introduced in mathematics, so that's why the thing. So
okay.
the syllabus only has the opportunity to explore maths from different angles.
So Riti,
That's a
you
good
use the
one.
word term exploration, that you're exploring different concepts and you're finding what you like, and maybe that just makes you more interested.
Yeah. So to the extent, so now let's split point number 8 into one part of it is regular, what Riti is saying, regular class 6, whatever they're doing systematically, that increase, and people are getting a bit more every day, a little bit trigonometry, and dhire dhire getting into it. Then that part of point 8 can be put with point 2, correct? Then you're saying you're attributing it to class 6.
Yeah.
Class 6 could be the teacher, it could be the regular trigonometry improvement, it could be this, that, and the other, it could be the drill, correct? So to that extent, then it goes with point 2. To the extent that the way I was interpreting it is that, the remedial maths class is giving an opportunity for further thing. In which case, it's correct attribution. In the other case, it's misattribution of the sort that we've already discussed.
Right.
Right? Point 2.
Yeah.
So in short, some of these can be clubbed as point 2, which is that actually your regular class 6 has a lot of good stuff that it's producing through the change of teacher, through the drill, through the eventual increase, and so on. And then you're misattributing, you're overestimating your remedial program. That's one. Right. The other is, you could also put the increased competencies. It's also a class 6 business, right? Point 3. So, right. On the other hand, parents are sending these kids to coaching centers or home tutoring is a different thing, correct? It's not a school classics thing, it's something else. And then we have the change in grading pattern, which can seriously over or underestimate, depending on how it goes. Right?
Yeah.
These are the reasons why this could be a problematic statement to say that the 30 to 70 average increase is a great kind of contribution of this particular program, right? In fact, something else is driving it. Before we take this off, let's just see if others who were not in this group, I think this group 2, others want to come in on any of these points, while they still have it on.
Yeah.
So, one thing here, because they did mention this, but I don't know whether they have explored this or not. So we can also owe this to the maturation, the change in the age of the children. And because, especially when we talk about the development stage, children are now better to understand the abstract, abstraction of that concept. So now that can be another way to see or look at this.
I think it's an important point. One way is to connect it with point 3.
Yeah.
Other competencies. They were focusing on language, but there are other cognitive things, right? Which come greater abstraction, greater comfort with certain things, which will help the maths also to, So I would say, so each of these points therefore can be maybe fleshed out in different ways. So point 3 could be around language lines. It could be about abstraction, right? Other kinds of maturation, maybe emotional, thing.
Yeah.
Though class 5 to 6, I don't know. I mean, but there could be other things, right, which could be happening, which need to be investigated rather than assumed.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Over to.
Could we also look at standard deviations, and because we don't know if the weaker students have really benefited out of this program because of the averaging.
Right. So that is kind of a more overarching comment, important, which is by only focusing on average. So the real question, I think, Seema, is on what basis do we attribute something to a program? Do we attribute it based, because after all, every kid will have their own trajectory. Either we say, here are my 25 report cards for last year and this year, that's it. We usually want to abstract and say something a little more, right? No, don't give me 25. Tell me, mota kya hua? So mota average में अच्छा improvement हुआ. Then you're saying नहीं, just average नहीं चाहिए, थोड़ा एक section within bottom वो distribution का एक भाग का भी दे दो, right? So I would say that as kind of refining the overarching logic. Okay, average is, so nobody will say average is useless, correct? Average is good, but what you're saying is उसके साथ एक दो और चीजें चाहिए. We are interested in the distribution, not just the average, especially one part of the distribution. So there it's not a matter of attribution, is all I'm saying. Right? Suppose, in fact, the lagging kids are not doing well, right? And the 30 to 70 is being driven up by the kids who are doing better within that group.
Yeah.
But still, that difference is still attributable to the program.
To the programs, yes.
So there is no issue of class 6 की वजह से या आपके exam की grading pattern, right? So in that sense, it's not it's an important point, but it's not about attribution. It's about a better way of picking up impact. Average is not sufficient. We want other things, right? Which is fair, but it's not an attribution issue. It's an indicator issue. More than an attribution issue, right? But fair point. Okay. Any other thoughts on this before we go to other groups? Okay, that's good. And I hope some of the other groups also had some of these points. So yeah, then maybe if you can just drop the screen share. Yeah, let's have one of the other groups also maybe chime in with why they think this is a problematic kind of statement, that the 70 minus 30 is all because of my program. Yeah, Naini, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is my screen visible? So in our group, we had Riya, Deepanjana, and Rahul. And we began by thinking about factors which could have worked in conjunction with the remedial classes to improve the performance of students. So some of the, I think all of these points have been covered, that maybe the regular classics maths teacher was teaching at the right level, better pedagogy, TLMs, maybe children were taking tuitions or coaching classes at home. Maybe because the children, because it's 25 children, so the school authorities must have, called the parents for a meeting, and they must have alerted that the children are going to be spending time in a remedial class after school, and that increased the parental involvement, parental attention, even the sibling attention or sibling support they get. Then we began questioning, the percentage increase and the claim that can be attribute. No, actually, the claim that the percentage increase is 30 to 70%, right? So the question which came up was, what about the other group of students? Maybe the percentage increase in the other group would also be 40. In that case, relative increase in performance could be attributed to others as well, and not necessarily remedial class. That, if all the children in the class are if the performance is increasing by 40%, so some of those factors, like the if we bring in the developmental perspective, if we bring in the perspective of child being able to understand, like Namrata pointed, the abstract concepts at that age, then maybe that is an increase which is just but natural in this age group. The second question we had about the claim was that the distribution of marks at baseline and inline was using averages, and averages are not representative of individual progress. And the third point, like this is something that, so with the no detention policy, I think class 5 is the first time that children in primary school are taking an exam and then being promoted to class 6. So maybe there was some exam anxiety associated with the math paper in class 5, which could be eased in class 6. And the fourth point was that maybe the paper was a bit easy, or the study for the paper was exam oriented.
Yeah, nice. So I think there are some of these things we've discussed,
Yeah.
but in some of them in a slightly different way, and I think a few newer points. So shall we just go through these just so that we understand them and see to what extent some of these points are about misattributing, and if it's misattributing, are you over claiming for your program this impact? Are you under claiming? What's happening? So let's start from the top. Factors that work better pedagogy and TLM used by regular class 6. This we discussed as point number 2 of the previous, I think, right, group's slide, which is class 6 has a maybe change of teacher, drill, increase, right, a bunch of mechanisms, better pedagogy, and so on. So in other words, yeah, this point is a clear case of misattributing to your after school program, some real impact which is actually being generated by a regular thing, and you're giving some mechanisms here, right? Pedagogy, TLM,
Right.
regular class. In fact, yeah, pretty, similar to the previous discussion. So that's the second one. Tuitions also we discussed, right? Coaching centers. So misattribution, you're ending up overestimating. Of course, if you want to be mischievous, you can say coaching centers reduce your learning levels, right? I mean, if you argue that, then of course, then you're underestimating the true program effect. I don't really think that's the case, but right. I mean, we are assuming coaching centers add value to learning. Suppose they add negative value, then, but either any which way it's misattribution. Most likely it's overestimation, as we already discussed.
Right.
The third is a new point, right? Parental involvement. And I think it's a very plausible thing that 25 kids, school would have to, get parents' permission. After all, logistics, school bus 25 के लिए नहीं चलेंगे तो क्या ये वो, parents will be coming, oh, my kid is not doing well, oh, right? Oh, there's a bit of a stigma. I mean, there must be a lot of stuff, right? But that attention might trigger some other things. And for example, parents might spend more time with the kids in maths at home. Right? Whatever. Khelna band, ye karo, wo karo, whatever. Right? Now, so the question is this point about parental involvement a matter of misattribution, or is it a matter of correct attribution, but pointing out the mechanism, right? That's the question. Now, it's a bit similar to the Eklavya story, right? That you could argue that it's correct attribution. It's the remedial maths program. The fact that you had a program is what triggered parental involvement and led to good result, right? Maybe it's not what you actually covered in the content of your session. That's a mechanism issue, right? But some other mechanism, parental, but it's still attributable to your program. If in that interpretation, then it's not a misattribution problem. Pura 40 percentage point increase, आपके remedial maths program से ही हुआ. अब कैसे हुआ? Not because of what they transacted in the remedial maths content, but some other thing, right? That's a mechanism issue, but you can still attribute it to the program. Here's where it gets tricky, right? Is it program or is it right? But see, but you could argue parental involvement is because of the program. If you didn't have a program, this parental involvement wouldn't have come, and therefore whatever.
Parental involvement can be because of the 5th standard report card as well. That I realize that my child has failed in this. Yeah, I need to put in more time, irrespective of what the school is doing.
Yeah, that's a very good point, right, Seema? Now it's very hard to parse this apart, but to the extent that some parents are able to separate the thing and they're just looking at remedial maths class. So some parents could have, at the end of class 5, before they started the remedial maths, they could have told themselves, "Nahi, agle saal ke liye aap kuch aur karenge," right? That's even before the remedial maths thing. So that would if that kind of thing was happening, which of course is very difficult to establish empirically, but if that was happening, as Seema is saying, then in fact that becomes misattribution. Correct? That becomes misattribution. It had nothing to do with your remedial maths program. It was just a natural consequence of parents caring from before, right? It was. On the other hand, if it is because parent involvement is because of the remedial maths program, then right. So it now depends on the nature of parental involvement to know whether it's misattribution, like Seema is suggesting with her story, or correct attribution, as I was suggesting. And maybe all these things are happening, correct? So we need to parse them apart to be able to make some claim about correct attribution, right? Fair enough? In practice, we can't tell these apart, right? So this is all just games we are playing in our minds to conceptually separate them, right? Okay, so far so good. What about the stuff in the bottom half of this page? Questions about the claim. Other groups of students, maybe the percentage of change. The average we already discussed, as Seema correctly pointed out. We could go beyond the average and look at other aspects, right? I think that is the first of those bullet points, right?
No, that's the second one.
Distribution of marks. Oh, that's the second one.
That's
The first one is. Let's spend some time on the first point, right? What you're saying is, suppose it's a class of 100 students, right? It's a big school, class 5, they have lots of divisions, and 25 of them, got picked up for this, but the other 75, right, don't have the remedial maths program. And what you're saying is, suppose there is a equivalent 40 percentage point change in the average of those other 75 kids between their class 5 final exam and their class 6 final exam, correct? Then you could say that's a good reason to suggest it's generally what's happening in class 6. Your change of teacher, your TLM, this, that, right? Yeah. But here's the issue here. They are not strictly comparable. Those 25 and those 75 are not comparable, correct? So suppose those 75, for argument's sake, suppose those 75 kids also happen to have an exactly same 40 percentage point improvement, right? Imagine that earlier their average was 55 and now it is 95, right? 40, just for argument's sake, right? But those are kids who maybe had some different kind of ability, or they were in a different place, which made them score over 50% in the first place, correct? Right? So in class 5. So even if the 75 increased their average by 40 percentage points, it could be that, that 40 percentage increase for the 75 were not in your remedial maths. It's because of good class 6 stuff, right? Let's assume that, right? Good stuff happening in class 6 through TLM and teacher is bumping up the 75 kids average by 40 percentage points, right? So, but it could be that those things in class 6, such as drill and TLM, naturally would improve the 25, these other kids, by only 10 percentage points. It could be, right? Just as Crocin paracetamol doesn't work on each of us the same way, it could be that what's happening in class 6, right, will push the 75 kids by 40, but without remedial maths, it would push the other 25 by only 10. There's no reason to think it would push the 25 also by 40, because those 25 are different from the other 75, correct? So for argument's sake, suppose it pushes the 25 kids, the regular class 6 business, it pushes your 75 kids by 40 percentage points, but it pushes your 25 only by 10. In which case, the remaining 30, correct? After all, 40 change happened in the 25. The remaining 30 is because of your maths program. In which case, you could say you are overestimating, but only by a little bit. You're saying, right? You're saying 40 is because of my program, but 10 of it is actually because of regular class 6, and 30 is because of your program. Correct? There's an overestimation, but there's still some good program effect. On the other hand, suppose the regular class 6 stuff would naturally have improved these 25 kids by 50. By the way, I hope you can hear me. There's some jata outside, which I can't do much about. Can you hear me? Is there
Yes.
too much background noise on my end?
Yes, yes.
Oh, there is background noise.
We
but
can hear you.
You can hear. Yeah. I'll try to be a bit more careful, but I think it's temporary. So what I was saying was, now I'm flipping the story, right? And I'm saying, suppose as Manny is saying, the other 75 would have had a 40 percentage point change because of class 6 effect, regular class 6 effect. But that regular class 6 effect would have improved our 25 kids by 50. In which case, they only end up with 40, right? In which case, our remedial maths program has a minus 10 effect. Correct? Without the program, your kids would have increased by 50. It could have gone many different directions, is what I'm saying, right? So this bullet point about what about the other group of students doesn't necessarily tell us, right? What is happening? What is the program effect of our remedial maths program? Because they are not comparable.
Relativity is important, Suraj, because you see, ultimately, the purpose of the remedial class is actually to bring these 25 kids at the same level that the remaining 75 kids are at, right? So, if in case, we don't do that relative comparison, that suppose the performance of this particular group has increased by 30% and this particular group has increased by, say, the high performing group has increased by 10%, then we'll not really know how much of it is actually attributable to the program. So
true, but what I'm saying is comparing also we can't, because they are not strictly comparable. There's something different about the 75 and there's something different about the 25 in the first place. You're not randomly choosing 25 for your program. If it was random, now why would you randomly choose? It's a different matter. But suppose you had randomized, right? Which is why, by the way, RCTs is a big thing now in impact evaluation.
yeah.
In RCTs, what they do is they randomly select units, kids or whatever, villagers or whoever they're dealing with, they select them randomly to participate in the program, right? The whole logic of randomization is that means the ones you're not selecting are comparable with the ones you're selecting because you're randomly selecting. But here you're purposively selecting, not randomly selecting. You're selecting a particular group of 25. Now you have to imagine how would your regular class 6 teaching without remedial maths have affected these 25 compared to those 75. It needn't have affected them similarly, right? No doubt, you could say it would have given a bump to both if it's done well, but it may not be a similar bump to both, correct? And we don't know how similar or dissimilar it is.
So heterogeneity is actually, we will consider heterogeneity over here.
This is not about heterogeneity effect. That particular term has not to do with this.
No.
Yeah.
As in,
so what do you mean
not
by
the-
heterogeneity here? Yeah.
So what I mean is that for the next point, that the distribution of marks might be, skewed in a particular direction at the baseline and the end line, and averages are not representative of individual progress. Right.
Okay. That is true.
Average is a good indicator. And over there also, the individual progress might be different because different aspects of the remedial program might resonate differently with other students.
True.
Like
That's
paracetamol example.
Yeah, and that's a point that we've discussed previously, right?
Yeah.
That's different from the first bullet point. We are discussing the first bullet point, right? Which is, can you compare the 75 with the 25? And the fact that the 75 are doing better in class 6 means that class 6 has a good effect even on the 25. And therefore, you're misattributing the improvement in class in those 25. It's actually because of class 6, not because of your program. And why do we know it's because of class 6? Because those 75 are doing well. What I'm saying is that's not a very strong argument, because those 75 doing well because of class 6 is because they are different from these 25, right? Suppose the class 6 is geared towards better performing students, right? The entire thing is, suppose I'm just making a story, right? Suppose your class 6 is, therefore your class 6 is now further alienating your 25, because it's now teaching to, right? It's picking winners and only teaching them. Suppose, if that is the case, the fact that class 6 is creating a good bump up in scores for the 75 doesn't tell us anything about the 25. My bigger point being that these are not strictly comparable. I'm slightly exaggerating my case just to make the point, right? They're not that incomparable either, no doubt, right? So we can learn something, but we can't be very confident about what we are learning, right? On the other hand, suppose your class 6 is geared towards less performing students. So the fact that your 75 are improving by big chunk means that maybe your 25 are improving by even bigger chunks. So we can't quite say, right? Because they're not comparable. Just because one group is getting average 40 increase doesn't tell us anything about the other group. Now you have to get into details. So we have to theorize about what's happening in class 6 and how it would differentially affect these 25 and that 75, right?
Got it.
But it's not directly, oh, इनके साथ ये है तो इनके साथ भी ऐसा हुआ होता. It's not possible because they're different. They're not, right? Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Yeah. Moving on for time, this exam anxiety is a good one, right? So maybe the exam anxiety is slightly alleviated because they're getting better at taking exams. Ek to ho gaya already, right? You're getting better at it. And that's why these kids are performing better. So if exam anxiety, which is reduced because of repeat from class 5 to class 6, is the reason, then is there misattribution happening? Definitely it's misattribution to your program. Is it misattribution which overestimates or underestimates the program effect? If it's exam anxiety, it overestimates, correct? It overestimates. So some of the improvement of 40 percentage points is because exam anxiety reduced. But you're attributing all of that to your program, that's overestimation. Yes, Vaishali?
Could we also say that the anxiety is reduced because of the remedial classes, because they are feeling
See, so now that's an interesting one. If the anxiety is because the remedial class is giving them confidence.
Yes.
हाँ हम करेंगे because after all इतना हमने extra कर दिया, right? Then it's not a misattribution anymore. Then it's a mechanism within the correct attribution, correct? So therefore, what exactly is driving it becomes important to know what's attribution and what's misattribution. It's a very good point, correct? So because this other exam anxiety effect would have been true even of the other 75, may not be to the same level, right? But this, if it's peculiar to these 25 because it came from their attending the program, then it's no longer misattribution, right? Yeah, good point. And then the last bullet point, maybe the paper was easy. We talked about that previously, correct? It's just to do with your instrument. Study was exam oriented. Again, it may not be picking up learning because you're just sort of padding somehow, right? Sort of teaching to the test to just get them over. So then that last point is about overestimation, right? Of the true impact of your program, right? So it's misattribution, and specifically it's misattribution through overestimation. Okay, we're going to be running out of time soon. Let me just check with others who are not in this group, if there's anything to add to these particular points. Like Vaishali just now kind of added a nuance to the exam anxiety story. Okay, so in the interest of time, let's just turn to the last group. And I think some of the stuff has already been covered because I think, but if you wanted to add, especially from your discussions, something which we haven't discussed so far about misattribution.
I think me and Namrata discussed most of the points after Vaishali's this thing, and I did not type. I had my handwritten notes, so did not present it. We have discussed most of the points.
Okay.
Okay. Only good. One additional thing, maybe it's covered, that the 6th standard students had access to more resources. That was one. Yeah, but that goes into covered under the
original point 2, meaning the first point 2.
I was thinking a little addition to this point, because I was thinking about this point only, resource. So it also happens like by the age of like when you get older, then you also have access to other things, like you can have access to mobile phones, internet, you can have access to social groups and all those things. So that may also impact the performance in this case.
Right? Now, by the way, there are technical terms for all these things we are discussing. I'm not going to burden you with those because important thing is to get a feel for the different ways in which you can wrongly attribute, correct?
Yeah.
So so exactly what you're saying, Namrata, right? So what you're saying, so there is maturation. So that's why I sort of very specifically chose class 5, class 6. So maybe now the parents are allowing them to go to the store.
Yes.
That's the kind of age.
Absolutely.
Now they're having to calculate, acha paisa dena kitna change, right? Or acha they're getting into, at least maybe the boys are getting into cricket. I don't know, I'm fitting some stereotypes here.
Their games are more structured right now.
And there's some kind of maths involved and right? So there are other things happening which might, right? So this sort of goes in with the first kind of listing where there was a competency, correct? Some of those competencies may be not necessarily school, right? It could be maturation related competencies and social, right? Acha, you're allowed more things, this, that, right? All of that could affect this, right? So there's a bunch of things happening, but all of that will lead to overestimation of the program effect, because the other things are helping you get better at maths, but now you're saying it's all because of your remedial maths, then you're putting too much credit to the remedial maths, right? So good. So to wrap up, and we'll maybe continue some of this in the next session. It's a very tricky business to just use a before-after comparison and attribute to the program, right, based on a before-after comparison, right? And we all know what the usual solution is. Have a control group. Correct? So our entire discussion today, there was no control group. Right? So Nani's point, oh, what about this other 75? Right? They are, you can compare, but they are not, the idea of a control is they are comparable with the group which is actually getting your intervention, right? Then you track them. So next time when we meet, we'll see how all of these problems in principle at one shot can be solved with a good control group, right? And then we will complicate it after that. But first, the point is before, after comparison. But we do this all the time in our daily life, right? We don't know, ye kar diya, pehle aisa tha, oh, right, it's because of that, right? I mean, we are, I think, primed to think like that psychologically, right? We do that all the time. So, but once you start thinking as we did today, what are all the reasons why something else is really the story, and then we are leading to misattribution, right? So now we'll see the one stop solution is the control group. And now how does that work? And how does that solve this problem, all these problems? And is that really a great solution? That's where we turn to next time. So we'll circulate some optional short readings for those who are interested.
Is it advisable, doable, all those parameters, specifically with younger children?
Yeah. Now there's a whole bunch of other things which are convenient, right? That's what I'm saying. I mean, the whole ethics of, I think one of the groups when I sat in, where you're like, yeah, can you even call it? This is stigma, but then stigma led eklavya, right? I mean, so everything, there are wheels within wheels, right? Each of these things, right? But then, first of all, it's unfair to only look at math scores in an exam, right? That was the other point. I mean, there must be so many other things of consequence which we should consider, right? And rather than just math scores. So sort of getting to Seema's point about, what psychologically are they feeling more troubled because they're being labeled as this, that.
Absolutely.
And is that a bad thing? Maybe in the long run that makes them strive more. On the other hand, it might make them more depressed. I mean, right? Everything now we have to chart possibilities.
Labeling theory at work.
Yeah, labeling.
There's one thought that was coming to my mind when Suraj talked about the general things that we say on a daily basis about the changes. Like we hear this a lot, like हमारे ज़माने में तो ये होता था और अब आजकल के ज़माने में ये होता है. So this is the most controversial change that we talk about, and it's either over attributed or under attributed.
Correct. And when the हमारे ज़माने में, usually it is everything Kalyug, right? Everything is today is this thing हमारे ज़माने में, right? You can right. But in fact, it could be major misattribution, because I mean at that level, though, it's even in this small example, we are seeing so many possibilities of misattribution. Right? The bigger the claim, the harder it is to escape this problem. So good. So we'll continue along these lines. The idea was to get us in thinking about what are the problems with attributing causality. Really, that's what we've been doing, right, through this example. So now how do we solve this? To be continued. So
thanks a lot, Suraj, for another brilliant session. Rahul, you were a participant in the second group. I agree to that. And I'll see you all next week. We'll meet each other again. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.